The high desert wind doesn't just whisper, it steals. It steals the water from the creek beds, the hope from a woman's heart, and the sound of the footstep behind you. For Ilara, living on the scorched edge of the Arizona Territory, survival was a daily battle fought with grit and silence. But the silence broke the day she knelt in the dust outside her cabin. There, glinting in the dying light, was an arrow, black fletching obsidian tip. She knew the hand that drew it. It wasn't a warning. It was a marker, a promise. By nightfall he will return, and he never ever misses his mark. The sun was a copper coin, dissolving into the western rim of the world, bleeding heat and a deep, angry orange across the sky. Ilara pulled the threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders, a useless gesture against the memory of the day's heat, but a necessary one against the coming chill of the high desert night. Her homestead was little more than a scar on the land, a one-room cabin built of stubborn pine, a dry, rotted corral, and a well that coughed up more sand than water. She had been sweeping the packed earth yard, a futile attempt to impose order on the chaos of the wilderness, when her gaze snagged on it. It was almost hidden, lying flat in the cinnamon-colored dust near the water trough. An arrow. Ilara's breath hitched. Her heart, so steady and rhythmic in its lonely work, gave a painful lurch. This was not some stray shaft from a pima hunter lost on a bad shot. She knew this arrow. She knelt her knees, cracking in protest, and hovered her hand over it without touching. The shaft was smooth, dark wood, polished to a dull sheen. The fletching was not turkey, but raven feathers dyed a flat, consuming black, and the tippet was not steel, but a piece of obsidian, napped with a deadly serrated precision. Corvus. The name was a violation, a ghost word she hadn't allowed to pass her lips in 5 years. She snatched the arrow from the ground, the stone tip cold against her palm. She'd last seen an arrow like this, buried in the chest of a man named Marcus, her late husband. Corvus was the man who had put it there. A bounty hunter, yes, but more than that. He was an artist of an executioner, a man who moved through the territories like a rumor taking contracts others wouldn't touch. He didn't use a Colt or a Winchester. He used a bow. He believed it was cleaner, more personal. Ilara stood scanning the ridgeline that formed the far boundary of her property. The rocks were settling into purple shadow, but she saw nothing. No movement. No glint of metal. That was his way. You never saw Corvus. You only saw what he left behind. She backed toward her cabin, the arrow clutched in her hand like a viper. Why now? Why here? Her life was small, penniless, and quiet. There was nothing here to hunt. A small sound, a muffled cough, came from inside the cabin. Ilara's blood ran cold. Oh God! There was something here to hunt. She bolted inside, slamming the heavy door and dropping the crossbar into its iron brackets. The cabin was dim, smelling of wood smoke and dried herbs. In the corner on a small cot, a young woman watched her with eyes wide as dollars. "What is it, Ilara?" the girl whispered. Her name was Clara, and she was barely 19. Clara had stumbled onto the homestead 3 days ago, half dead from thirst, her dress torn and her feet bloody. She was running, but she wouldn't say from what. She'd only said she was from the town of Redemption Creek, 20 miles west, and that a man wanted her dead. Ilara, seeing the ghost of her own desperate past in the girl's terror, had taken her in. It was a mistake. It was a kindness she could not afford. Nothing, Ilara lied, her voice rough. Winds picking up. She went to the hearth, her back to the girl, and stared at the arrow. This was no random hunt. Corvus had tracked the girl here. He knew. The arrow wasn't a missed shot. It was a message left for her to find. It was his signature. It meant he was closing in. "We need to prepare," Ilara said, her voice dropping into a register Clara hadn't heard before, a low, flat tone stripped of all warmth. "Prepare for what?" Clara asked, sitting up. "Is it him? Is it Mr. Graves?" Ilara turned slowly. "Worse. It's the man he hired." She jammed the arrow into the rough wood of the mantelpiece, the obsidian tip sinking deep. It stood there, vibrating slightly, a black mark against the pine. "Who?" Clara pleaded. "A man who doesn't have a name," Ilara said, moving to the ammunition box she kept under her bed. "Just a reputation. He's called Corvus." She pulled out her rifle, a Winchester .73 that had been her husband's. Its action was smooth-oiled and ready. She began loading it, the brass cartridges, clicking into place with metallic finality. "What does he want?" Clara's voice was trembling. Ilara paused, the rifle heavy in her hands. She looked at the girl so young, so breakable. Then she looked at the arrow, a dark promise protruding from her wall. "He wants his mark," Ilara said, "and I've just let you into my home." Outside, the last of the light died. The ridgeline was gone, swallowed by an impenetrable blackness. Night had fallen, and somewhere in that dark, a hunter was watching. Ilara knew she couldn't just wait. To wait for Corvus was to let him choose the terms of battle, and that was a death sentence. She needed information. She needed to know what exactly Clara had done to bring a man like Corvus down on her. And she needed supplies. Her stores were low, and a siege required more than a half-full box of cartridges and a side of bacon. She left Clara in the cabin before dawn, barring the door from the outside, a crude but necessary lock. "Don't open this for anyone," she'd commanded. "Not even if you hear my voice. I'll use the signal." 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 more. Clara had just nodded her face, pale, clutching a small leather-bound book to her chest. Ilara had pretended not to notice it. The 20-mile ride to Redemption Creek on her weary-legged mare, Bess, was a torment. Every shadow seemed to hold a figure. Every gust of wind sounded like the whistle of a fletching. She rode with the Winchester across her lap, her eyes scanning the broken land. This was his territory. The arid canyons, the rocky mesas, the sparse juniper trees, they were an archer's paradise. A rifle was loud. It announced your position to the entire county. A bow was a whisper. It was the voice of death itself. Redemption Creek wasn't much of a town. It was a single dusty street, pressed between 2 red rock bluffs, boasting 2 saloons, a general store, a livery, and a sheriff's office that always looked closed. It was a town that held its breath, waiting for the next boom or the next bust. Ilara tied Bess outside Arthur's general store, the mare's head drooping. She trusted Arthur. He was a sour old man, but he was fair, and more importantly, he didn't ask questions. The store smelled of coffee beans, cured leather, and dust. Arthur was behind the counter, polishing a pair of spectacles. "Ilara," he grunted a full greeting by his standards. "Long time. Thought the drought might have baked you out." "Not yet, Arthur," she said, pulling her list from her pocket. "I need cartridges, 4440, and flour, salt, coffee." Arthur's eyes, magnified by the lenses, flickered over her. "Stocking up for a war. Winter's coming." It was a weak lie. Winter was months away. He grunted again and began weighing out beans. "Your business? Just know the town's on edge. Sheriff Brody's been drinking more than usual, and that's saying something." "What's wrong?" Ilara asked, keeping her voice casual. "Barnaby Graves. That's what's wrong." Ilara's hand tightened on the counter. That was the name Clara had whispered. Barnaby Graves. He was a land baron from back east, rumored to be buying up all the water rights in the territory, often from ranchers who suddenly met with accidents. He owned the biggest saloon, the Gilded Cage, and it was said the sheriff himself. "Graves is in a foul mood," Arthur continued, bagging the flour. "Lost something important. Put the word out he's paying top dollar for its return." "Something or someone?" Ilara asked. Arthur stopped his work. He looked at her and his gaze was sharp. "You heard about the girl then? The one who worked in his office at the Gilded Cage? Clara. A little quiet thing. Disappeared 3-4 days ago." Ilara's blood turned to ice. "I don't get into town much." "Well, she's gone, and Graves wants her back. Bad." Arthur leaned in, lowering his voice. "He hired a man to find her, not one of his usual thugs, a specialist, some half-Indian tracker, they say. Moves like smoke." "Corvus. What did she do?" "Stole something," Arthur whispered. "Something he values more than gold. A book, his private ledger." Ilara's mind flashed to the small leather book Clara clutched. The mark wasn't just the girl. It was the book. As Arthur finished packing her supplies, Ilara's eyes drifted to the wall by the door. It was covered in notices, rewards for livestock advertisements, for patent medicine, and wanted posters. One poster was new. It wasn't from the U.S. Marshal. It was a private bounty, handwritten. $500 reward. For the return of Clara Matthews, formerly of Redemption Creek. Questions to be directed to B. Graves, the Gilded Cage. It didn't say, dead or alive. It didn't need to. Ilara paid her bill, her hands moving mechanically. As she stepped out onto the boardwalk, the sun was high and brutal. The street was empty, save for a few horses. She looked toward the sheriff's office. It was a waste of time. Sheriff Brody was a tall man, with a weak spine, a puppet in Graves's pocket. The law in Redemption Creek was whatever Barnaby Graves said it was. She was truly alone in this. She loaded her supplies onto Bess, her mind racing. Graves wanted the ledger. Corvus was hired to get it. That meant Clara was leverage, or a loose end. Ilara had to assume the latter. As she mounted, a voice called out from the alley between the saloon and the land office. "That's a heavy load, ma'am." Ilara's hand snapped to the Winchester in its scabbard. A man stepped out of the shadows. He was not Corvus. This man was bulky, wore a dusty duster, and had a face like a slab of raw meat. He had a prominent silver tooth and smelled of cheap whiskey. Ilara recognized him as Fletcher Graves's chief thug. "Just supplies, Mr. Fletcher," Ilara said, keeping her voice steady. Fletcher ambled closer, looking at her supplies, then at her. "Ain't seen you in a long time, Ilara. Not since your husband. Well, you live way out on the dry fork, don't you? Lonely out there. Easy for things to get lost." "I manage," Ilara said. Her thumb was on the hammer of her revolver. "Mr. Graves, he's looking for something that got lost," Fletcher said, his eyes narrowing. "A little stray. You see any strays out your way, you'd be smart to let us know. There's a reward. I see coyotes and lizards. If I see anything else, I'll be sure to shoot it," Ilara said. Fletcher's smile was ugly. "You always were a sharp-tongued one. Be a shame if that pretty mouth got you in a world of trouble." He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust, just shy of her horse's hoof. "Have a good ride, ma'am. Watch out for snakes." He turned and lumbered back into the saloon. Ilara's hand was shaking, but not from fear. From rage, she kicked Bess into a trot, heading out of town. The encounter confirmed it. Graves was using his own men to search, but he had hired Corvus as his insurance policy. Fletcher was a blunt instrument. Corvus was a scalpel, and now both of them knew she was stocking up. The clock was ticking. She'd found his arrow in the dust, and in town she'd found the reason for it. By nightfall, the debt would be called in. The ride back to the homestead was faster fueled by a cold dread. Ilara pushed Bess harder than she should have, but the image of Fletcher's silver tooth and the far worse image of a black-fletched arrow burned in her mind. She was not a stranger to this kind of fear. She was not a simple homesteader, a widow scratching a life from the dirt. That was a costume she had worn for 5 years, a penance. Her husband, Marcus, hadn't been a rancher. He'd been a dreamer who thought the world owed him a living. He'd started by rustling cattle, then moved on to robbing coaches. Wells Fargo, the Arizona Stage Company. He was good with a gun and bad with consequences. And Ilara, young and blinded by a desperate kind of love, had been good with a horse and a map. She had been his lookout, his planner. They'd been successful for 2 years. Too successful. They'd stolen enough to dream of Mexico, of a new life. But they had stolen from the wrong people. Not just the banks, but a consortium of land barons who used those coaches to move their payrolls and their sensitive documents. The consortium hadn't hired the Pinkertons. They hadn't trusted the marshals. They had pooled their money and hired Corvus. He'd found them in a box canyon near the border. It hadn't been a fight. It had been a reckoning. Ilara remembered the sound. Not the crack of a rifle, but a series of wet, percussive thwacks. The other 3 men in their gang were dead before they knew they were under attack. Marcus, always too proud, had charged out from their cover, firing his revolver into the rocks. An arrow had taken him in the throat. He'd fallen clutching the black shaft, his eyes wide, with a terrible gurgling surprise. Ilara had been left. She had her Winchester, but she couldn't see the shooter. She'd simply waited, her rifle aimed at the rocks, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. He'd emerged from the shadows like a part of the rock itself. He wasn't what she expected. He was tall, lean, and moved with a grace that was almost liquid. His heritage was a map of the continent, part native, part European, with eyes that were a pale, piercing grey. He carried a massive recurve bow. He didn't even look at the dead men. He just looked at her. "You're Ilara," he'd said. His voice was calm like a man discussing the weather. "You killed him," she'd whispered, her grief a hot coal in her throat. "He was my mark," Corvus replied, as if that explained everything. "My contract was for the men. And the money." She'd raised her rifle. "I'm not letting you take it." He'd watched her, his head tilted. He was unarmed, his bow hanging at his side, but she'd felt utterly, completely outmatched. He hadn't knocked an arrow. "The money is in the saddlebags, on the grey," she'd said, her voice breaking. "Take it. Just let me bury him." Corvus had stood there for a long, silent minute, his grey eyes reading her. She wasn't a threat. She was just broken. He'd seen the maps she'd drawn, the notes she'd taken. He'd known she was the brain. But his contract, it seemed, was specific. "I was paid to kill the thieves," he'd said, his voice flat. "Not the widow. But you were part of this." He'd walked over to her, so close she could smell the cedar and dust on his leather jerkin. He'd gently taken the Winchester from her hands. She'd let him. The fight was gone. "You have a choice," he'd said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a judge's sentence. "I can take you in and you will hang, or you can disappear. You can burn this life to the ground and start a new one, a quiet one. If I ever see you again, Ilara, if you ever cross my path, or the path of men like your husband, I will not be so generous. I will finish the job." He'd gestured to Marcus's body. "Bury him, then ride east until you find a place no one will look for you. And pray I never have cause to look for you." He'd collected the money, retrieved his arrows from the other men, and melted back into the rocks. He hadn't even taken her horse. She had buried Marcus, and she had ridden east. She'd found this derelict homestead and had spent 5 years washing the blood from her memory, paying for her sins with sweat, solitude, and silence. Until today. She'd crossed his path. By taking in Clara, she had stepped back into the world of men like Graves and Fletcher. She had broken her parole. When she finally reached the ridge overlooking her cabin, Ilara dismounted, leading Bess the rest of the way. She moved with practiced quiet, her eyes scanning her own yard. The door was still barred, just as she'd left it. The arrow was still gone from the dust. She gave the signal. 3 knocks. A pause. 2 more. The bar scraped back and the door opened. Clara pulled her inside her face, a mask of terror. "You were gone so long," she cried. "I'm here," Ilara said, dropping the heavy supply bags. "Bar the door, now." As Clara fumbled with the bar, Ilara went to the mantel. The obsidian-tipped arrow stood stark against the wood. She yanked it free. "Clara," she said, her voice hard. "I need the truth, all of it. I saw the bounty poster in town. I spoke to Graves's man. I know you have a ledger." Clara's face crumpled. She backed away, clutching the small leather book that she had, until now, kept hidden. "He'll kill me," she whispered. "The man outside will kill us both," Ilara snapped. "He's here. I know he is. He's waiting for dark. What is in that book that's worth your life? Worth my life?" Clara sank onto the cot, her hands trembling as she held the book. It's everything. I worked in Mr. Graves's office. I handled his correspondence. He's not just buying water rights. He's making them." "What does that mean?" "He's been dynamiting the sources," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "Small charges up in the canyons. He's diverting the creeks, drying up the springs that feed the smaller ranches, the ones that won't sell to him. He's starving them out, then buying their land for pennies." Ilara thought of her own dry well. "But that's not the worst of it." Clara continued, her voice cracking. "The ranches that still won't sell, the ones with their own wells, he's poisoning them. The Miller family. Their cattle, it wasn't disease. It was arsenic. Mr. Graves wrote it all down. Who he paid, which springs, to dynamite how much poison to use. He's a collector. He likes to read about his victories." Ilara finally understood. This wasn't just theft. It was murder. This ledger wasn't just evidence. It was the man's entire evil legacy. It could bring down the most powerful man in the territory. "He found out I could read," Clara whispered. "I wasn't just the girl who swept the floor. I'd taught myself. He started using me to write his letters. He thought I was too stupid to understand. But I understood, and I started copying his ledger into my own book." "This book?" Ilara said, pointing to the one in Clara's hands. "Yes. I was going to take it to the U.S. Marshal in Prescott, but he found my book. He tried to, and I ran. I just ran." Ilara took the obsidian arrow and held it up. "This belongs to the man he hired. 5 years ago, he let me live on one condition, that I stay out of his world. By hiding you, I've broken that promise." Ilara walked to the window, peering out a crack in the shutter. The sun was touching the horizon. Night was coming. "He's not like Fletcher." Ilara said more to herself than to Clara. "He's not a thug. He's a professional. He won't burn us out. He won't spray the cabin with bullets. He'll wait. He'll be patient. He'll wait until we make a mistake. One of us will have to go for water. One of us will open the door. And he'll be there." What are we going to do?" Clara wept. Ilara turned from the window. Her face was calm, the fear replaced by a cold, hard resolution. The penance was over. The widow was gone. "First," Ilara said, checking the action on her Winchester, "we don't make a mistake. We don't give him an opening. And second," she looked at Clara, and her eyes were as hard as the obsidian arrow tip. "We give him a different target." The cabin sank into a thick, oppressive silence as the last light was vacuumed from the sky. Elara extinguished the single lantern, plunging the room into a darkness broken only by the faint red glow of the dying embers in the hearth. Every sound was magnified. The scrape of Clara's boot on the floorboard sounded like a rock slide. The wind whistling through a crack in the chinking sounded like a human scream. "He's out there," Clara whispered from her cot. "I know," Elara replied. She was sitting in a hard-backed chair, angled between the door and the single window, her Winchester resting across her lap. "Stop talking. He can hear you. From out there, he can't. He can," Elara said, her voice a low growl. "He can hear the rustle of your dress. He can smell the smoke from our fire. He knows we're in here, and he knows we're afraid. That's what he wants." Hours passed. 1 hour. 2. The moon, a pale sliver, rose, high enough to cast a sickly skeletal light over the yard. Elara's eyes ached from straining to see movement in the shadows. Her muscles were cramped. This was the art of the hunt, the part Corvus excelled at. The waiting. He was wearing them down, letting their own fear do his work for him. He was a spider, and they were the flies, trapped and terrified, waiting for the inevitable. Clara, despite her terror, eventually succumbed to sheer emotional exhaustion. Her breathing deepened, and a small, hitched snore escaped her. Elara envied her. Sleep was a luxury she would not have tonight. It was some time after midnight when it happened. Thwack. The sound was sharp, violent, and close. It came from the door. Clara jolted awake with a stifled cry. Elara was already on her feet, the Winchester at her shoulder aimed at the door. Silence. Then a voice. It was not loud. It was conversational, but it carried through the thick pine door as if he were standing right next to them. "Elara." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. It was him, the same calm, chilling voice from the box canyon. "I know you're in there, and I know you have Clara Matthews." Elara remained silent, her finger on the trigger. "The man who hired me, Mr. Graves, is not a patient man, Elara. You know his thugs. You met Fletcher in town. They will come at dawn. They will not be surgical. They will burn this cabin to the ground with you both inside it." He was lying. Fletcher wouldn't wait for dawn. But he was setting a new clock, playing a new angle. "I'm offering you a choice," Corvus continued, "the same one I gave you 5 years ago, a chance to walk away." "What choice?" Elara called out, her voice hoarse. "Send out the girl, and the ledger. Do that, and I will be gone. You will be left in peace. Graves will have what he wants. You will have your life. You'll kill her," Clara shrieked from the cot, grabbing Elara's arm. "He wants the ledger." "Clara," Corvus's voice replied, his hearing uncanny. "The girl is just a vessel. Send her out, unarmed, with the book. I give you my word I will not harm her. My contract is for the ledger." "Your word." Elara scoffed, her voice dripping with contempt. "The word of a paid killer. I am a professional Elara, not a butcher like Fletcher. My word is my bond. It's the only thing I have. I am offering you survival. You took it once. Take it again." Another thwack. This one was sharper. It was an arrow sinking deep into the wood of the door, right at head height. Elara could see the shaft vibrating just inches from her face. "You have 5 minutes to decide," Corvus said. "After that, my offer of a peaceful exchange expires, and my original contract, well, it becomes more flexible." His footsteps faded. He was gone, moving back into the shadows. Clara was sobbing a high, panicked sound. "Don't let him take me, Elara. Don't! He's lying. He is—" Ilara said. But she was thinking. Corvus was a professional. He did have a code. He was also a liar. He needed the ledger, but he also needed to silence the witness. His offer was a trap. If Ilara opened that door, an arrow would kill her, and another would kill Clara. But what if Corvus didn't know about Fletcher's other plan? Graves was a man who tied up loose ends. He wouldn't just hire Corvus. He'd hire someone to clean up after Corvus. Fletcher's sneer in town. Be a shame if that pretty mouth got you in a world of trouble. He wasn't just warning her. He was threatening her. "Ilara, what are we doing?" Clara pleaded. Ilara looked at the arrow in the door. It was a threat, but it was also a position. He was out there to the left of the door near the woodpile. He had given away his location. Or had he? Corvus was better than that. He'd fired the arrow and moved. He would expect her to fire back at that spot. "Give me the book," Ilara said. "What no?" "Give me the book, Clara," Ilara demanded, snatching it from the girl's hands. She also grabbed the bundle of supplies she'd bought: the flour, the beans. "What are you doing? He wants the ledger," Ilara said, her mind working with a desperate clarity. "He's out there waiting for it to come through the door." She moved to the cabin's other opening, the small shuttered window that faced the corral. It was on the opposite side of the cabin. "He's a hunter," Ilara whispered, unlatching the shutter. "And all hunters have a blind spot. They focus on the door. They focus on the obvious." "You're going out there?" Clara was horrified. "No," Ilara said. "I'm changing the game." She took a deep breath. She threw the wooden shutter open. Crack a rifle shot. Split the night. Not the sound of a bow. A rifle. The bullet slammed into the wall above Ilara's head, sending splinters flying. "Get down!" Ilara screamed, shoving Clara to the floor. A volley of gunfire erupted from the ridge line. Bullets tore through the thin walls of the cabin. It wasn't Corvus. It was a posse. "It's Fletcher," Ilara yelled over the din. Graves didn't wait. He sent his thugs. The cabin was being torn apart. Glass shattered. The water barrel burst, sending their precious water flooding across the floor. Then from the darkness came a new sound. A high-pitched scream, followed by the thump of a body falling. The gunfire from one position stopped. Another scream. Another thump. Corvus. Ilara realized the truth with a sickening jolt. Corvus hadn't been lying about Fletcher. He'd known they were coming. His offer wasn't a trap for her. It was a trap for Fletcher. He was using Ilara and Clara as bait. He was in the yard in the dark, and Fletcher's men with their muzzle flashes were lighting themselves up like candles on a birthday cake. Corvus was hunting. "He's killing them," Clara whispered in awe. "He's not doing it for us," Ilara said grimly. "He's angry. Graves betrayed him. He sent a clean-up crew. That's an insult to a professional." The gunfire became sporadic, panicked. Men were shouting, firing blindly into the shadows. "Stay here," Ilara ordered Clara, who was hiding behind the overturned cast-iron stove. "Don't move." "Where are you going?" "He's busy," Ilara said, her eyes glinting in the moonlight streaming through the bullet holes. "And he's not paying attention to the cabin." She grabbed the ledger and her rifle. She crept to the back wall to a section she knew was loose. It was a risk, but it was the only one she had. "This is our chance," she said. She put her shoulder to the loose planks. "While the wolves are fighting, the rabbit escapes." She pushed, and a section of the wall gave way, opening a dark, splintered hole into the night. The night air was sharp and cold, filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the ozone tang of fear. Ilara crawled out of the hole, moving low and fast, her moccasins making no sound on the packed earth. She kept the cabin between herself and the ridge line, where the last of Fletcher's men were making their stand. She heard a man shout, He's in the rocks by the old oak." A flurry of rifle shots barked, chewing bark from the tree. In response, there was only a single deadly thwip, a wet cough. Silence. Corvus was dismantling them one by one. Ilara didn't spare him a thought. Her only goal was the stable, a small leaning structure 50 yards from the cabin. Bess was in there, along with a desperate, slim chance of escape. She shoved the precious ledger deep into the front of her shirt. She moved from shadow to shadow, the woodpile, the dry well, the broken wagon. The moon was a curse, painting the yard in stark black and white. She was exposed. "Ilara the girl!" A voice bellowed. She froze. It was Fletcher. He was still alive. He wasn't on the ridge. He was close. "I see you, widow!" he roared. He was by the corral, his bulky frame silhouetted against the dark line of the hills. He raised his rifle. Ilara dropped and fired all in one motion. Her shot was instinctive, aimed at the center of his mass. The crack of her Winchester felt deafeningly loud. Fletcher grunted, the shot spinning him. But he didn't fall. He fired back. The bullet screamed past Ilara's ear, so close she felt the heat of its passage. She scrambled behind the stone well, her heart pounding. She was pinned. "You're in it now, Ilara!" Fletcher yelled, his voice thick with pain. She'd hit him, but not well. "Graves pays for you dead, the girl dead, and that damn tracker dead. I'm walking out of here with a bonus." He fired again, the bullet ricocheting off the well stone, stinging her face with rock chips. Ilara pressed her back against the stone, reloading the rifle. She was trapped. She couldn't get to the stable. She couldn't get back to the cabin. Clara was in there alone. Think like you used to. She was a planner, not a gunfighter. Fletcher was a brawler. He was wounded and angry. He would charge. She waited. The silence stretched. The shooting from the ridge had stopped. That meant Fletcher was alone. Or Corvus was. "Come on out, widow," Fletcher taunted. "Let's finish this." Ilara poked her hat out on the end of her rifle barrel. A shot immediately blasted the hat from the barrel, sending it flying. Good Ilara thought. One more shot gone. She heard him crashing through the brush coming around the well. He was loud, clumsy. "Got you!" he bellowed, rounding the corner. Ilara wasn't there. She had rolled away in the other direction, into the deep shadow of the trough. She rose to one knee as Fletcher stumbled into the open, his rifle aimed at the empty space where she'd been. She had him. Clear shot. "Drop it, Fletcher." Her voice was as cold as the moonlight. He froze. He turned slowly, his silver tooth glinting. His left arm was bloody, hanging useless at his side, but his right hand was on his rifle. You shot me, you... Drop the rifle, kick it away." "Or what?" he sneered. "You'll shoot me, I don't think you have it in you. You're just a farmer." "I wasn't always," Ilara said. It was a standoff, a fatal calculation. He was deciding if he could raise his rifle before she could pull the trigger. She saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. He was going to try. Ilara's finger tensed. Ziz-zist, thunk. Fletcher's eyes went wide. He made a small, surprised "oh" sound. He looked down. An arrow, black-fletched and obsidian-tipped, was protruding from the center of his chest. It had entered with such force that the stone tip had punched clean through his duster on the other side. He gurgled, blood foaming at his lips. He dropped his rifle and collapsed into the dust landing with a heavy, final sound. Dead. Ilara spun her rifle up, scanning the shadows. "You've become sloppy, Ilara." Corvus stepped out from the roof of the stable. He hadn't been on the ridge at all. He'd been above them, watching the whole thing. He dropped to the ground with the silence of a great cat. His bow was in his hand. Another arrow was already nocked, pointed loosely at the ground. "You missed your shot," he said. "You hesitated." "He's dead, isn't he?" Ilara said, her voice shaking, the adrenaline making her sick. Her rifle was still aimed at his chest. "He is. No thanks to you." Corvus walked past her and stood over Fletcher's body. "Barnaby Graves, a man of low character. He hired me to retrieve a ledger. Then he sent this refuse to kill me. He broke the contract." "So you killed them?" Ilara said. "I defended myself," Corvus corrected, "and I protected my professional reputation. No one breaks a contract with me." He looked up, his pale grey eyes fixing on her. "Now, the ledger. Give it to me." You just saved my life," Ilara stammered. "I saved my own. Fletcher was shooting at you, which meant he wasn't shooting at me. Your presence was a tactical convenience. The ledger, Ilara. What will you do with it? My original contract was to retrieve it and return it to Mr. Graves. My new contract is with myself. Graves's bounty is still $500. But the U.S. Marshal in Prescott, I imagine he would pay much more for proof of felony water rights theft and multiple murders." Ilara stared at him. "You're going to sell it to the law." "The ledger has a value," Corvus said simply. "I intend to be paid. Graves's money is no good to me. The Marshal's is." He took a step toward her. "Give it to me. Or do you intend to use that rifle?" Ilara looked at the bow in his hand. He could put an arrow in her heart before she could even think to pull the trigger. But it was more than that. He had, in his own mercenary way, just saved her. And he was in his own way seeking justice. She slowly lowered the Winchester. She reached into her shirt, her hand trembling, and pulled out the small leather-bound book. Corvus watched her, his expression unreadable. She held it out. "What about the girl? What about Clara?" "The Marshal will want to speak with her. She's a witness. Her testimony combined with this," he tapped the book, "will be enough to hang Barnaby Graves." "And you?" Ilara asked. "You'll just ride into Prescott and hand it over, a man like you." A small, cold smile touched Corvus's lips. "I won't ride into Prescott. You will." Ilara was stunned into silence. "What, my face corps," Corvus said, "is not welcome in the Marshal's office, or in any office of the law. I am a known entity. You, on the other hand, are a grieving homesteader. A widow who bravely took in a terrified girl. You are the perfect sympathetic witness." He sheathed the arrow he was holding, a sign of temporary trust. He walked over to Fletcher's body, and with a grimace of distaste, pulled his obsidian-tipped arrow free, wiping it clean on the dead man's duster. "This is the twist, Ilara," he said, not looking at her. "The mark. I came for the ledger. But the true mark is Barnaby Graves. He's the one who broke the rules. He's the one who brought this chaos to your door. And he's the one who must pay." "You want me to take this to Prescott?" Ilara was reeling. Why not just mail it?" "Because a document like this without a witness is just paper. It needs a story. It needs her story." He nodded toward the cabin where Clara was now peering out of the shattered door. "She must testify to what she saw. And you must testify to what happened here tonight. An assault on your home, an ambush." "They'll call me a liar," Ilara said. "Graves owns everyone. He'll have me arrested." "Not in Prescott," Corvus said. "This territory is too big for one man to own completely. The Marshal in Prescott, a man named Bennett, is a federal appointee. He doesn't answer to local land barons. He answers to Washington. He has been looking for a way to break men like Graves for years. This," he held up the ledger, "is the hammer he's been waiting for." He was offering her a way out, not just from the siege, but from her entire life, a way to finally close the book on her past. "So you're just giving it to me?" Ilara asked, suspicious. "I am not giving it to you," Corvus said. I am making an investment. You and the girl will ride to Prescott. You will give this to Marshal Bennett. You will tell him your story. He will pay you for the information, and he will place you both in protection. The bounty on Clara's head will be voided. Graves will be arrested. And what's in it for you? Ilara demanded. The bounty, he said. The reward for this information. The U.S. government pays well. Marshal Bennett will give you the money. And you will give it to me. You trust me to do that, to just meet you and give you the money. Corvus's pale eyes met hers. I am trusting that you want to live. I am trusting that you know what I am. If you take my money, Ilara, I will find you. And this time, I will not be generous. This time, I will finish the job I should have finished 5 years ago. Do we have an accord? It was a deal with the devil. A devil who had just saved her life. A devil who was offering her and Clara a future. Yes, Ilara said, her voice firm. We have an accord. Good. Corvus looked at the sky. You have about 2 hours until dawn. You need to be gone before Graves's other men come looking for Fletcher. They'll find a massacre. They'll assume you're all dead. It will buy you time. He turned to the stable. Your mare is old. She won't make it to Prescott in 2 days. He whistled a low, sharp sound. From the darkness behind the stable, a magnificent black stallion, tall and powerful, emerged. It was Corvus's own mount. Take this horse, he said, grabbing the reins. He will outrun anything Graves has. And you? Ilara asked, astonished. I will take your mare. She will be slower. But I am not in a hurry. I will be in Prescott in 3 days. There is a small mission church, San Esteban, on the south side of town. Be there at noon, with the money. He was giving her his horse. He was giving her the ledger. He was giving her his trust, thin and sharp as it was. Go, he said, tossing her the reins. Get the girl. Ilara ran to the cabin. Clara stumbled out, white-faced and trembling, clutching her small bundle of possessions. What's happening? We're leaving, Ilara said, pulling her toward the stallion. We're riding for Prescott. She mounted the powerful horse, its energy thrumming beneath her, and pulled Clara up behind her. The girl wrapped her arms tightly around Ilara's waist. Ilara looked down at Corvus. He was a shadow in the moonlight, his face unreadable. He had killed 8 men tonight. He had saved her. He was a monster, and he was in a strange way her savior. Thank you, she whispered. Corvus just nodded a curt professional gesture. He turned and picked up the reins of her old mare, Bess. Ilara, he said, as she turned the stallion to leave. She paused. Yes. You're not a farmer, he said. Stop pretending to be one. He melted back into the shadows, leading her horse. Within seconds he was gone. Ilara looked at the dead men in her yard, at the bullet-riddled cabin that had been her prison for 5 years. He was right. That life was over. She dug her heels into the stallion's flanks. The horse leaped forward, clearing the broken corral fence in a single powerful bound. They hit the open desert at a dead run, the wind whipping at their faces, the lights of Redemption Creek far behind them, and the promise of a new, dangerous dawn rising in the east. The ride to Prescott was a blur of exhaustion, fear, and a desperate, burning hope. Corvus's stallion moved like a force of nature, eating up the miles of arid territory, never seeming to tire. They rode for 2 days, stopping only to water the horse and rest for brief, fitful hours hidden in rocky arroyos. Clara, silent and traumatized, clung to Ilara's back, the ledger, a hard, square promise against Ilara's chest. They arrived in Prescott on the morning of the 3rd day. It was a real city, bustling with soldiers, miners, and politicians. Brick buildings stood 2 stories high, and the streets were crowded. After the silence of her homestead, The noise was a physical assault. Ilara found the U.S. Marshal's office, a sturdy building with a flag hanging limply out front. Leaving Clara with the horse, she walked inside. The man behind the desk was broad grey-haired and had a moustache that looked like it could stop a bullet. His badge simply said, "Marshal Bennett." "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Marshal," Ilara said, her voice cracking. She was covered in dust, her hair matted, and she knew she looked like a madwoman. "My name is Ilara. This girl," she gestured to Clara, who was hovering in the doorway, "is Clara Matthews. We have information, evidence, concerning Barnaby Graves of Redemption Creek." Bennett's eyes, which had been bored, snapped into sharp focus. "Go on." For an hour they talked. Ilara told him everything. Clara, finding her voice, presented the ledger and explained line by line what the codes meant. She pointed to the entries detailing the dynamiting, the land grabs, the arsenic. When she was finished, Marshal Bennett was silent for a long time. He stared at the ledger, his face grim. "Mr. Graves," he finally said, "has been a boil on this territory for a long time. But he's slippery. We've never had a clean case." He looked at Clara. "Your testimony, young lady, is brave. And this book," he tapped the ledger. "This is the nail for his coffin." He stood up. "You two are in my protective custody. You'll be given a room at the hotel under guard. We ride for Redemption Creek tonight. With this, I can get a federal warrant that supersedes any local law Graves has bought." "Marshal," Ilara said, "there's the matter of the reward. The government, do you pay for information like this?" Bennett smiled, a rare thing. "For evidence that will dismantle a criminal empire, we have a discretionary fund for exactly this. It's a hefty sum, $1,000, more than she'd dreamed." "Can I have it?" Ilara asked. "In cash. Now." Bennett raised an eyebrow. "Eager to start your new life?" "You have no idea," Ilara said. An hour later, Ilara had a heavy envelope in her pocket. It was 11:45 a.m. She left Clara with a deputy and walked alone through the streets of Prescott. She found the mission church San Esteban on the south side of town. It was a small adobe building, its bell quiet. She stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled of old wax and incense. The pews were empty, save for one. In the back row, sitting in the shadows, was Corvus. He was dressed not as a tracker, but in a simple dark suit. He looked for a moment like any other man pausing to pray. Ilara sat in the pew in front of him. She didn't turn around. "You're late," he said. His voice was a quiet murmur in the holy space. "The marshal was thorough," she replied. "He's on his way to arrest Graves." "Good," Corvus said. "A tidy ending." Ilara took the envelope from her pocket. She placed it on the bench beside her, reaching back. "It's all there, $1,000. She felt his hand take the envelope. The brush of his fingers was cool. "You received double," he observed. "The original bounty was $500. "I told him what Fletcher and his men did," Ilara said. "I told him about the siege. The price went up." "And you're not keeping the extra?" he asked. There was a note of genuine curiosity in his voice. "You're not the woman I met 5 years ago. She would have kept it." "That woman is dead," Ilara said. "I paid my debt." She stood up, ready to leave. "Ilara," he said. She paused but did not turn. "Marshal Bennett will offer you and the girl a new life. He'll put you on a train back east, give you new names. Take it." "And you?" she asked. "Where will you go?" "There are always more contracts," he said. "Men like Graves are never in short supply, and I am, as ever, a professional." "Corvus," she said. "The arrow, the first one, the one I found in the dust. You left it for me. Why was it a warning?" She heard him stand up. He was right behind her. "No," he said, his voice close to her ear. "It was a question. I was asking if the woman I spared was still in there, or if she'd truly become a farmer. I had my answer when you went to town instead of running. I knew you would fight." He stepped past her, moving down the aisle toward the door. "You're just letting me go?" Ilara asked. "What about your promise that if you ever saw me again?" Corvus paused at the door, his hand on the wood, the bright rectangle of sunlight framing him. "I never saw you, Ilara," he said without looking back. "I was never here, and neither were you." He pushed the door open and disappeared into the blinding Arizona sun. Ilara stood alone in the cool darkness of the church. She was free. The ghosts of her past, the spectre of Corvus, the shadow of Barnaby Graves, they were all gone, settled by blood and ink. She took a deep breath, the first easy one in 5 years. Then she walked out into the light, not as a widow, not as a runner, but as a survivor, ready to claim a life that was finally truly her own. The dust has settled in Redemption Creek, but the story is far from over. Ilara and Clara may be free, but the West is a vast, untamed place, and figures like Corvus are always hunting in the shadows. What did you think of Ilara's choice? Was Corvus a villain, a hero, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you are on the edge of your seat, and if you believe in stories of survival and karmic justice, please do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. It truly helps the channel. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and ring that notification bell. We have so many more stories from the frontier filled with drama twists and the fight for redemption, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thanks for listening.